My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path. Well, hello.
Hello.
Today we are interviewing Rachel Willoughby-Greene. She's a therapist, and we met her just back in January at one of our retreats.
Yes.
Rachel's a fascinating person, has great energy. We both love her.
Yes.
And she does equine therapy.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating adjunct to the normal therapist's bag of tools.
Yes.
So we hope you find it as interesting as we do.
Yeah. And more information about Rachel, her links will be in the episode description. So here we go. Well, thank you for joining us today, Rachel. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful day to be recording. So we won't keep you too long. Get it back out with your animals.
No, I appreciate that. I do. I'm really glad to be here though. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
thank you.
So when I did reach out to ask you about coming on and sharing your journey, what was that experience like for you?
So my initial probably response to anything is, I carry beliefs about enoughness, right? And so like, I don't have anything to share or enough to share, or I don't know enough, right? Like I carry a lot of enoughness.
Yeah.
So that was probably my initial reaction. That always goes with gratitude because I'm always appreciative of it. And I was like, I appreciated it and I was excited about it, but I definitely carried what would I bring?
Well, we're about to find out.
Yeah.
Right.
And we,
pressure.
right, are not worried about that at all. So
No, we're not. You got this.
yes. Yeah. So when you think about your inner knowing, as of today, what's that like for you? Like, what are you aware of in regards to your thought process or what you feel in your body or just anything that you are aware of about it?
So I will say that retreat, by the way, was a really pivotal moment for me to return to a knowing, because I think, and I remember even journaling about and talking about, my quote unquote knowing, like whatever that was, like from childhood, just having a sense of a knowing or an awareness. And I think the further I got into the clinical world, the further I started to get away from it, because then I was very much like, but I have to prove everything. I have to have, everything has to be evidence-based. And I have to have certainty, or as much certainty as I possibly can. And so I've noticed over the last few years of being so heavily into that I started to lose sight of that knowing and lose sight of my own creativity because I felt like there wasn't space for it, that I couldn't, because I even stopped writing and I stopped blogging because I thought, well, this isn't, I don't want to have to do research on this, right? To find evidence for this statement. And so that retreat regrounded me in a lot, including that empty jar that I picked has been very, very meaningful actually since then. And so now I do have much more of a sense of that. It's hard to put words to sometimes, but I think when you talked about it at the retreat, and then I know you talked about it in a podcast, is my body afraid or is it my mind? I can't remember if that's exactly how you said it. But even that language helped me to put language to what it is that I feel when I have a sense of knowing, because it's very much more of an embodied sense. And it's not about a certainty, like intellectually, it's a settledness. Like it's hard for me to describe it. Like I wish somebody could take it out of my head and like put image to it or words to it. But it's very much so I'm much more in tune with it since that retreat than I was prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I know what you mean about the settledness. I feel like for me, it is Like peace in my body. I mean, I'm still exploring it. I don't want it to come across like I've got it all figured out. Sometimes I'm like, is that what that is still? But I feel like it is a stillness that I experience. Yeah. I really appreciate your awareness around the clinical evidence base and how that process took you. Obviously, not intentionally, right? But it takes us away from our knowing when we can get so focused on that certainty that isn't certain. Yeah, that's a great distinction and awareness. How do we hold the balance for those?
So what's it like to get some of your creativity back and some of that freedom back when you're taking that into your work as a clinician?
Yeah. Freeing, for sure. Very freeing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a level of confidence and even just kind of settled into myself that comes with it, where it's like confident enough to just trust my intuition on some things, even if it's like, sometimes I'll have this thing in my head of going, okay, well, if somebody would ask me, how would I describe this intervention? Right. And so I think I'm always aware of that, of course. And, being ethical, but especially for somebody who uses equine, as part of therapy, like there is a very abstract piece to that. And there's an intuition and there's a depth of, spirituality, for lack of a better way to say it, that goes along with what a horse brings into a session that you can't just quantify, right? Like we want to just quantify it all, which I think is why people continue to do research on it. But there's a piece that can't be. And so I think it's me finding enough trust within myself to know that I'm doing good work and to listen to what's coming up in me when I'm in the room with someone. And also external voices. I think I'm profoundly blessed, like how many people I have in my life that believe in me and that believe in me more than I believe in myself. And so I think I've just started to just trust those people more, which helps me to trust myself more.
Yeah.
Support network.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is important. Yeah. Do you feel like that support network is something that you have been, cultivating over time?
Probably. So this is where my self-doubt comes in, because I'm also very much someone who feels undeserving of the level of, I can feel that in my body, the level of support that I do have. And so it's always this, am I doing enough to have earned that? Right. So that exists in me. This is something that I have to work on. And that this is, my therapist would be like, yes, this is part of our treatment plan. And so I would like to say that I hope so. Right. I hope that I do enough and I give enough and that I cultivate those enough. It is also hard for me to embrace it because I don't always feel like I deserve it, whether I have evidence for that or not. It's, yeah. And I think I think that's old.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. But I think I've been very blessed throughout my life to have, and at different times of different support systems that show up in different ways. I think I have so much of it that it's hard to not just be totally humbled by it. And
yeah.
That's not something you hear very often, at least not that I've heard very often. Let me put it that way. It just sounds unique to me. Do you think it's unique?
I don't know. Maybe I'm so in it, I'm not sure why that's hard for me to answer. Maybe of course, in my work, I see so many people feeling undeserving that I would imagine that it's not, but maybe we just don't talk about it enough.
What do you think, Theresa?
Wow. It is a big question, I think, Rachel.
I mean, I think part of it is is becoming aware enough that you recognize, okay, I have this, and this. But there's more than that.
Yeah. I mean, my pause, right, and trying to answer it is really trying to hold that broader, like the bigger picture of that, of the question. I think it goes back to some of what you were saying, which is the enoughness, right? Can I even see if the people around me are supportive? Or do I just dismiss their supportiveness and decide I'm not supported? And I'm not saying this is simple or true, right? I'm just thinking, right? Like we have our own part to play in our support network too.
Definitely.
Right. And so we're going to get to whatever Walker's big smile is on his face in a moment because I want to know what you're thinking.
Hold it. For me, I'm like a goldfish lately. Wait, let me write it down first.
So I do think there's the work that I think is necessary for us to get to that part where we can even discern whether we have that in our network or not, right? Because I think about people that I've worked with, and that is often something that they struggle with. And then over time, it's like, okay, well, maybe that person really does support you. But I think sometimes it's difficult for us, the knowing of what the reality is that someone's experiencing versus the story in their head of what they're experiencing. And we carry so much story. Yeah. And it's interesting. So I go farther down that, path. And then I think how when we are intentionally working on our worthiness or enoughness, our relationships with the people around us change. And so I think people that are close to us, maybe it's a role they haven't played, but they can play now because maybe they're better able to offer. Because I think when we struggle with our worthiness, our enoughness, we have some level of wall built up right around us that's always protecting us. And so, if someone's trying to come towards us and we've got this some level of barrier, right? They may not even show us that they can be. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think, wow, it is a really big question. So, yeah, I'm sure there's more if, I kept trying to go towards it, but those are the things that come to mind as you guys are talking. Yeah. What are you thinking as I...
Well, no, I totally agree. I was thinking earlier, whether it's because I don't think we always recognize support, or if we don't believe, if we're in a space of such a depth of believing that we don't deserve it, then we may not see it. As you were talking, I was, of course, like our brains do, thinking back to, times of childhood of when I was struggling with things and, there was like, say, the one therapist who got it, or the one teacher who got it, or, or whether it's a family member, or so I think those people sprinkled throughout, which were incredible blessings. But I struggled so often with not doing, like I struggled with things that my siblings didn't struggle with, right? And so I felt like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't going to school like I was supposed to be going to school. Things were more difficult for me. And so in my way, right, or my perception, I'm sure my siblings had their own struggles. This is what mine looked like. And so I remember not feeling deserving of the support, right? So like the story that I started to tell myself was, well, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So then therefore, why are you helping me?
Shame.
And yes. And that was a big one for me. And, I would literally hide behind the couch, which became symbolic for me of shame and of hiding behind the couch. Yes. So I think that's where my mind was going, of where I can see where I started to tell myself that story. And I do. So I'm in a space of where I can absolutely recognize the support and the gratitude for it, but I still have that underlying of, have I done enough for it?
Yeah.
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 Little booger.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself wanting to crawl back behind the couch again, what do you do?
So my therapist and I have done a lot of work in therapy, and it's been interesting. Some of the work that he has done with me is, so there's a lot of inner child work and of bringing, so how do I put it? So actually the way that it's played out from therapy to life is doing the things in life that are life-giving, that I feel connected to that little girl, and like what brings her out and what brings her out from behind the couch. And so that has been some of my work, and which probably why like the animal work is so profound to me, because that was me just through and through as a little girl with horses and dogs. And I mean, any kind of critter I could have been caring for and as a child.
Yeah.
So I think that piece has helped. And then just even the awareness that's what I'm doing, and turning toward like love and compassion of self. And that's where that support system, I think, shows up, because I have enough people in my life that are safe enough that I can say, I feel shame in this. And my husband knows, the hiding. I remember years ago, we were standing in the kitchen. I don't remember what disagreement we were having. We were both struggling with stuff. And that was the first time someone had said to me this in adulthood. And he's like, stop hiding behind the couch. And that was the first time as an adult hearing that. Right. And so I think then it became something for us to be aware of.
Yeah.
But the support system is huge, and having people that I feel safe enough that I can say, I feel shame.
Yeah.
And to be able to actually share what it is that I'm even feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
It definitely brings me either out of it or from going back behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking, babe?
Oh, I'm thinking that having people that can understand when you say I'm feeling shame, that can grasp that, because I don't think everybody can.
Agreed.
And also what was striking me is I don't know. You can have family members, and you can have people that you know, and you can have a partner that supports you, and you can still feel very alone. Like you don't have that support network. And then sometimes I think, so there's a lot going on for me around this conversation, but sometimes it feels like there's a price that comes along with that support, right? I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about in general, that there's, I don't know, being able to establish boundaries and still accept, right? So I'm not making any sense. You're looking at me like, what?
No. I am trying to understand what you're saying. Can you give a more descriptive example of what you think we might bump up against?
Well, especially with family members, there's a range that family members can hold for you, from a support standpoint. And when I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, if you progress yourself to the point where you can, kind of where those boundaries are, then you can feel gratitude for that range of support that you can get. And, maybe that's how we build in our own construct of a support network that we have, and be able to tap into that gratitude piece that grounds us. Because if you don't recognize that, and you're asking for something that person can't give, or there's a price that comes when you go outside that range, then you're not going to feel that. You'll feel abandoned.
Sure. Sure. So what I think I am hearing you say is us developing our own level of discernment in regards to each of those relationships. So we're not asking for something we can't get. Right.
Or you ask and you recognize the limitations. It doesn't mean you don't ask, I guess. Anyway, just fascinating. Yeah. But what's interesting about from Rachel's perspective, just the gratitude piece for having that. And, I was selfishly thinking to myself, gosh, I wish I felt that type of gratitude for having this broad support network,
Yeah. Yeah. When I was talking about the discernment, I was thinking about changing our story to reality versus the fantasy that we have. So, and I think when we get to reality, it's easier to have gratitude because it's real.
Sure.
Yeah.
Real and messy.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And all those things complex.
Right.
It's not all butterflies and rainbows.
Nope. Right.
Horses and happy dogs, It's no, and the big smile, I'll just get right back to that. It's recognizing our own responsibility in that process. Whether it's, I'm not responsible for how people treat me.
Right.
Well, yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I'm also responsible for finding my path, to the support network that Rachel's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right here, right now. Right. Ask me tomorrow. It'll make it different.
Which is the beauty, I think, to recognize that it can, right? We can have a new experience or learn something new and go, oh, okay. Maybe it shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking earlier, Walker, about like kindness has boundaries kept coming into my mind. And I think that, with my experience with, the things that my husband and I went through, I think that was a piece where I really had to learn to hold space for someone who was in shame while also having boundaries around what was happening, right? And that was really where I learned kindness has boundaries, because I'm very much someone who could just serve, disregard, very like self-sacrificial. And so I think that's what was kind of coming to my head, or coming to my mind when you were sharing, because there is a way, I think, of holding space, but there's also boundaries and relationship.
Agreed. Yeah. Oh, we are so complex. So, Rachel, for you, when you think about like different points along your journey to this place that you are now, learning to trust yourself, learning to see your value, what are some of the things that you feel like have been supportive to you, practices or resources or experiences that you think have contributed to that in whatever way you feel like has provided growth? Yeah.
So, gosh, I feel cheesy going back to support. So that has been priceless to me, having people and all kinds of people in my life to learn from and have conversation with. I think that I've always kind of just been a seeker. And in my life, like I've done all kinds of different therapy, just very open to all kinds of different ways of wisdom and learning. And so I think that has been a big piece of it, because you just get information and you learn new things about yourself from each person and each perspective. So I think that's probably made a big difference for me. Animals, I learned so much from them, and so much from once I learned to be a student of them. I think I had a different relationship with horses when I thought I was always training horses. Okay. And so when I learned to actually be a student and to listen and to learn from them and not just always expect myself in the role of as teacher, I think that made a huge difference, because then I just learned constantly also about myself and intuition. That's probably one of the spaces where I feel fully myself. Like I always feel, like when you can just feel fragmented. And so it's one of the places that I feel like all parts of me come home and I'm just very grounded. So I know my therapist loves to use horse stuff and therapy and inner child work with me because I just feel very like all parts come home. My faith and spirituality has been really significant for me since I was a little girl. And I don't know, there was a depth of connectedness that I had as a little girl to something else, something greater, like even Sunday school and things like that were really hard for me. I didn't want to be playing with the kids. I would find the sanctuary to go and sit by myself, or the prayer room to go and sit by myself, or a tree outside to go and sit by myself in prayer. And so I think that there was just something I was very connected to that just hasn't ever left me. I am connected to it or active in that relationship at different points in my life, more or less, right? But there's still just always been a piece of that I think is a part of my knowing and groundedness. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you speak more about your work with the horses? Just because I think there's a lot of people that just don't have a clue. So
what would be, I almost feel like I don't even know where to start with it. Probably, and I will say this, probably because I'm in a space of evolution with it. And so I was actually just talking to a colleague friend of mine this morning who's also a horsewoman and a therapist. We were talking about this, of kind of both exploring where we're at with it. I think it's this constant evolution. So it's probably almost, maybe, is there a specific question that would be good to start with? Maybe that would be
sure.
Good.
So,
sorry.
When Andy Burgess was still alive, I went up and spent some time, with her. And then she, like did a session, with me, with a horse. And I was not raised around horses. I mean, like, know nothing about horses. And so it was really interesting for me in that time with her. I know that there were certain words that she said. I mean, it's been a while, so I don't remember exactly, but like, if my energy is clear, that the horse will know what I want it to do without me having to say that this is what I want you to do, and that I could do it, with whatever that intention was, and then just moving my body and the horse would respond. And it was a fascinating process. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe something around like that when you're doing that.
So I love this. So Andy was probably talking to you about connection, clarity of intent, and congruence.
Yes. That's it.
Those were the three things.
C's.
Yes.
Awesome.
Did I know that we had Andy as a mutual connection?
I don't know. I don't know how we would have known because I only met you in January.
Right.
That's
interesting. Sorry. So that's just a moment that's hitting. Goodness. I'm feeling that. I'm feeling emotion around that.
I can feel it in my body too.
So I'm probably thinking this with Gemma too. So I don't know if you knew. So I worked with Andy for a couple of years. So it was really interesting how she and I met. Because we were actually Horses and Heroes. We were trying to find property of our own. And so we had visited Andy's property and there was just something that connected Andy and I ended up taking my horse at the time over to her place and stayed there and continued to work with her and learn from her. And we did some workshops together with the ropes courses and horses. And when she passed, so one of my dogs died, then my dad died, and then Andy passed an exact month after my dad.
Wow.
And then I inherited Gemma. So the little Aussie that I just lost was Andy's.
Aww.
And so she was an amazing little dog and I think Andy knew, right? Not surprising. She knew that little dog was supposed to be with us. And then her horse Duncan, which I still use in therapy. And at the time, Tucker, the big Percheron, the big black Percheron that everybody was in love with.
Wow.
He is now working with Beth Russell as part of her program.
Okay.
And so she has a lot of Andy's horses as well. So even that process of me discerning for Tucker to go with Beth was a huge piece of what I learned from Andy, and this listening, and even listening, and the same with Kathy Huddleston, who was a partner of Andy's for a long time and fantastic horse trainer. They did a lot of work together for years, and of like actually asking the horse what the horse needs. And that was part of my process of discerning that I wasn't doing enough of the work for Tucker's capacity. Tucker loved to work and he loved to be around people and 24/7. And so he's doing beautiful work over there with Beth. But so, yeah. So it's funny. Sorry that hit me of that connection, because I know she touched a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the way that I experience horses, there's so much of what I've learned just from everybody. So I'll just give a little bit of background, and then maybe that will help as I am clunky working through it. So I grew up with horses. My dad was, so back in the 80s and 90s, horse trading was a big deal, right?
Wow.
And so it's like lots of horse sales. Unfortunately then, like the kill market here in the United States was still big. And so my dad was doing so we had a lot of horses in and out. I always knew, like, I was just in love. I was one of those girls that has been in love with horses since I was a child. Like, my siblings were exposed to it. Mm-hmm. It didn't connect to them, but I was just always in love and connected to horses. And as I struggled, as an adolescent and in high school and stuff, and I remember horses just being something that I could, again, always find myself in. Like, I could come home to them, I would find connection and confidence and all of these things that I had struggled with, outside of the arena, but I could find with horses. And so I knew somehow that I wanted to combine them with helping people. So I have wanted to be a helper since I was a little girl. Like, I just knew in some way I was going to do something of service. Like, I discerned being a religious sister for a lot of years when I was younger. Prior to becoming, I'm a convert to Catholicism. So prior to that, I thought I wanted to be in ministry. And then I discerned. So as I was working in Catholic ministry for a while and just discerned that I wanted to be in a space where I could help all people and serve all people, regardless of what outside of organization and institution. And I just continue to kind of just develop in a way spiritually too. And so that's when I went the path of counseling. And so I always just knew I wanted to bring horses and counseling together. Like, I knew what horses did for me. I knew I wanted to help and serve people. And there was a time I was going back and forth to Oklahoma for a couple summers during grad school, and I would ride with some horse trainers down there. And there was an afternoon that I realized the stuff I was being coached on that morning and with a different trainer, and then the stuff I was being coached on this afternoon with a different trainer, a completely different discipline, were the exact same issues I was having in my life. And I wasn't being consistent enough. I wasn't following through. I wasn't trusting myself. And I remember just sitting on this horse in the middle of the arena going, this is the exact, like, these are my issues. These are not just my issues on a horse. These are my issues in life. And so for me, that kind of solidified there's something here. And that kind of started my journey to discern, how do I combine these things? So I've worked with a lot of different people. I've been trained in several different modalities of equine-assisted psychotherapy. I think it's this constant process because it's less about what modality, it's less about this, this certification process versus this one and how they teach and that. And I think one of the things that really stuck with me from Andy was the horse as teacher, and was to learn to be in a space of what is going on in me and how is that coming out? How am I, that congruence piece?
Right.
The clarity of intent, the connection, all of those things. And so I don't know. It's interesting to me because it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever felt like this too. There's so many theories out there. You can almost get too much to where it's almost information overload. And I think regardless, when I step into the arena with the horses and a person, it's it sounds cliche to say trust the process, but to allow that story to unfold within the arena, to allow the horse to be a horse and allow the horse to have the freedom to be a horse and to just like hold and create space and perhaps some questions that help that person explore what's going on for them. Yeah, that's kind of what happens for me in the pasture or round pen or arena. But there's a profound, I think there's an openness.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember standing in the middle of the arena and having that awareness, as Andy was saying things, because she's standing like, over there, and she would just bring up different things to be aware of, and so for me, in my mind, it was like a congruence in energy, like that is what I was holding in my mind. And she's like, do you think that I don't remember what she said exactly, but, basically are your mind and your body giving the same message, and I'm like, I don't think so, but it was really very helpful that time, just being aware that my incongruency impacted this very large animal that's standing, I don't know, 50 feet from me, right? I was just like, so interesting. Yeah.
It's incredible. It really is. And there are those pieces that we know, right? Like that we know that kind of the congruence is an important and helpful energy for horses, that, being consistent and being attuned to them, and I love that perspective from a psychology perspective, right? How important how important attunement is prior to connection.
Right.
And so even that, like, what does that look like to be attuned to a horse or to an animal, and to build that connection? So it's like, there are all these things that we know. And then there are things that happen out there with the horses that just cannot be explained, can't be duplicated. This is where, and I always tell my clients, I'm like, this is the stuff that can feel woo-woo and can feel like this, what did you do? This feels like magic, like whatever. But there is a depth of knowing and responsiveness that they have to people that truly is, I think, beyond what we entirely know and understand.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But I think one of the lessons that I learned consistently, even in just working with my horses, of when I get into my head. And so when I am, say, even just, working a horse in a round pen, when I'm fully present, when I'm connected, I'm communicating, I'm clear, right, with my intentions. I know what I'm doing with this horse and how we're interacting. And then as soon as I let myself get into my head about something, or I start to think about something or worry about something, there is a disconnection that occurs, and that horse either stops or turns or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that piece is so important for us to learn and work that can be done with clients, is because we want to then look externally and blame it, right? We want to go like, why did you do that? The horse isn't listening to me, instead of then reflecting back, because it's less about what the horse is doing and it's about what was actually going on in me.
Yeah.
And that's such a profound piece.
Oh, yes.
Right? Of like, what happened in me when this horse did that, or this horse came close to me or went further from me, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that level of awareness. So even for me, I'm constantly learning from it, and then always realizing like, this is also a really profound piece that a client can also learn from. And so like, what happens when I disconnect from myself and my body and my knowing, and I just get into my head?
The same thing.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden there's disconnection.
Right.
Yeah.
When you said that about the horse turning away from you, I remember that, in that experience, that happening, and just, again, Andy, just continuing to try to increase my awareness of my experience, right? Not the horse. Like, we're acknowledging what the horse is doing, but really what's happening inside of me. Yeah. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
How do you think your work translates into, we talk about my inner knowing, and I think you can send a congruent message, and so you're really attuned to that. But then, how do you step it over to? I know these decisions are right for me in the moment because I'm congruent internally. I mean, can you connect the two?
Yeah, like kind of connecting from the arena to life. Yeah, so this is what I love about experiential therapy anyway. Because I remember, when I think about like any of my clients where we have worked on things in the office, right? Or even working on being able to ground or being able to regulate. But when you're standing in, whether it's a field or arena, whatever, and you're able to actually practice that in the moment, right? And then get a sense of what that truly feels like. And then you have this embodied experience of it, right? So I have this like sensory experience of what this felt like.
Right.
And I think that is what helps me. And I think that's what helps my clients and what helps me to then translate that. And so then I know what it felt like, right? And so I think that's the piece that I think what I've probably learned from horses and from all the horse people I've learned from and to translate out is that I know what that felt like. So then when I make a congruent decision, I know how that holds or how I carry that in my body and how there does feel a connectedness. And so for me, there is a settledness. I can feel it in my body. It's not, it's not just this, it's not this thing in my head. My body feels heavier, but heavier in a sense, not a burdensome, right? But a grounded sense, a wholeness, not that fragmented feeling. Yeah. So I think that's part of the work that I try to do is to really identify how did I experience that, whatever it is, whatever I'm doing that is somewhat experiential, and how I can translate that outside of it. Because then I know what that felt like versus like intellectually, right?
Sure.
Kind of, I have a theory about it, but now I have a embodied like sense of it.
Yeah. I mean, and so I'm going to push a little bit just because when we started the conversation, you were talking about coming to our retreat in January, and being in your clinical mind or, I have to have evidence based this and that. But daily, I'm assuming you're with clients doing what you're talking about, which is creating, congruence. Mm-hmm. It's like we can know, but we're not doing it outside the arena sometimes.
Yeah.
And if I'm maybe getting off track, but can you like clarify, how does that process work and how do we move towards, or how do you move towards, hey, I, open this back up and now I'm creating congruence in work and in life.
Right. Which is a really good question, and which is the journey I'm currently on.
Sure.
So I want to be like, stay tuned.
We will. We'll do this again. Yeah.
We can say wise words and not actually then remember them the next day. So.
Right. Yeah. Amen to that. Yes, because that is very much the space that I'm in, of truly in all things finding that congruence and honoring that. And it truly, like, I'm very much in the midst of it. And for me, it's space. And this is what I've had to ask for lately from a lot of people in my life, of like, just give me a moment or give me time. And this is where that empty jar is so relevant that I picked up at the that I was disappointed by initially. And I was like, funny. Of course, universe, you would give me what I need, not what I want. But so I keep that next to my bed. Mm-hmm. And so I realized at the retreat when we did that exercise and I picked this empty jar, I was like, oh, this is not as fun as I like thought, right? But what I loved about it, I was like, because this is truly what I need. I didn't need something else to do something or be something. I needed the absence of something. I needed space. That jar has sat next to my bed since that retreat. And just, I think it was about a week ago, there was like a moth or something flying around in my bathroom. And I was like, oh, I'll get it and let it outside. And there was nothing else. I'm like, what can I use? There was nothing else to grab. But then I remembered I had the jar. And so I got the jar and I put the moth in, I released it. And it just became like so symbolic for me of what I chose when I finally chose to open that jar and use that jar. And it was something very meaningful and it was purposeful, right? Like I wasn't just throwing something else in it, using it to store more things I don't need, right?
Yeah.
Like I was using it to catch this moth. Like granted, I like look for symbols and a lot of things, but it became very purposeful, right? Because then I was getting this moth and I was releasing it or whatever insect it was. And I'm like, this is how I need to use my life. This is how I need to use, or like be in relationship with my life or myself or my work, that I have this space and I allow this jar to sometimes have a void and have space and be empty, and then be very purposeful about how I fill it. Yeah. And I think sometimes the only way for me to discern that is space. And so I was just having that. So my friend that I was talking to earlier about the horses, we were talking about how important it is to allow the horses to have space when they need to create space. So to not keep them confined, not force them to participate in a session, but to allow the horse to be where the horse needs to be. And if the horse wants to leave, the horse can leave. If the horse wants to go to the other side of the pasture, the horse can do that. And that allowance of space creates clarity and creates safety. Yes. And I think that's the space that I find myself in, of truly the biggest truth sometimes I can have is, and I don't know, but at least I know I don't know. And so then I create space to then allow, like, how am I going to fill that jar? Yeah. Which I think is a very wordy
smiles
unanswer.
In the room here where it's like, wow, that's really deep. That's good. I like it.
Thank you. It's a lot of unanswer it's a lot of words for an unknowing. I don't know.
I think there was a lot of knowing in that. Yeah.
Well, I think the authenticity of the process is what we so need. Yeah. Because we do just often keep looking for the answer, right?
We do. We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so interesting. The experiential piece, when you brought that up, so much of that is what our retreats are, right? Is this experiential process, big, small, whatever processes. But I do agree that once we can experience in our body that, then it's like, oh, that's what that is, right? I mean, how do we know until we know? And then it's like, oh, okay, I can find that again. It may be hard, but at least I have a sense of what that feels like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's very different than what we just intellectualize something, or like a cognitive knowing of something.
Absolutely.
And probably why I love bringing the horses. And there's so much. It's kind of funny. I'm hearing myself talk and I'm talking about the horses, which is such a not an evidence-based therapy. And I'm like,
but it works.
It works. It works. And that's the beauty of it. And what's funny is we find ourselves in the field going, okay, well, but we can, as we need to satisfy insurance companies or whatever, like here's this evidence-based model, theory, whatever, that I can place under the umbrella, or how equine shows up under the umbrella of any of these things, right? Right. And so this game of justification of what we do. But I think that's probably how I find balance in both, in that space of the part of me that just wants to be open and intuitive and creative, because then that work allows me to do that. But then I can justify it, right? Finding ways to justify it clinically. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny as I just hear myself talking about that.
Yeah. It's interesting, just all the ways that speak to us, and help us heal. It would be nice if CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, fixed it all. Right. Our jobs would be much shorter.
They would.
Than they are.
Yeah. Our country, our culture would be in a very different space.
In a very different space. It would not take quite so long. Oh, we are slow to change.
Yeah.
For sure. Slow to even want to just see ourselves.
Yeah.
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 That assumption that we all seem to carry, that we are much less than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Oh, it took me back to when we started the conversation, you were talking about feeling like you had to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
It just stuck with me. I think a lot of people carry that. I know I do.
The enoughness or...
Well, I think earning it is like an add-on to enoughness. Anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking about our conversation yesterday about, does it always have to be hard? Can it be easy? Is it only valuable if it's hard? Can we find value in?
Yeah. Can I only have it if I've earned it? Is the hard part for me,
Yeah.
Hard cases only.
Right, I know. Yeah.
I feel ya.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. What it brings to mind is, this is like my language. That saying, and I know it gets said a lot of different ways, but, the pain to stay, we change when the pain to stay this way becomes too great. That's when we change. And I feel like some of what I'm trying to do as a clinician is to lower our threshold for pain. Because I think we can have such incredibly high thresholds. Like, how much torture do I have to go through, right? Like, how much pain do I have to be in? How much do I have to give? I mean, so it's like, can we reduce the threshold? I remember, for myself, at one point, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, like there was like mantra that I would, use to help, focus my attention and intention and attention. And, and I remember that this particular one was about like the deconstruction of the self. And I remember one day being like, that's enough, enough of that, like I don't need so much pain in order to change. I will increase my awareness of myself so that I can create change without that much pain. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I was just journaling about this. And so one of the books I reread again recently is Present Over Perfect by Shauna Niequist. And I shouldn't say I reread it. I re-listened to it. And I've been, I actually started to work through her journal that goes with the book this time. And one of the questions, several different questions, but one of the questions really prompted me to reflect on the struggle or difficulty that I create, that I feel like has to be, right? If I'm not exhausted, if I'm not struggling, if it's not painful, then I'm not doing enough. There is pressure to that sometimes. And especially, unfortunately, in the work that I do and the work that I love to do in the populations that I work with, but we can all get very much wrapped up in this service over self.
Yeah.
And, it's a 24/7 job and you show up and you are there present regardless. And so then therefore, if I feel rested, I feel guilty. I'm not doing enough. I'm not self-sacrificing enough. And these are old things. So then it's not surprising that I would find myself doing work that feeds that, right? This existed prior to adulthood. And even my patron saint is St. Joan of Arc. So then it's not surprising that I would also as a young girl feel drawn to that kind of a person or character, right? And so, but that just hits me because that's very much a space that I am trying to find allowance for myself of that it doesn't have to always be. I like that idea of lowering the threshold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's as soon as I have a productive work week and I also feel rested, I will struggle with that I probably didn't do enough.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
It's just so funny what we do.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yes.
Even when we know it
exhausting.
cognitively,
Right.
it's like, I know better than that, but
Yeah.
we do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do.
I guess the goal is less and less, right?
Oh, right. A little bit. Yes. What I say is less often, less intense, less long, right? Like that's really the goal. Yeah. I mean, not thinking that, oh, we're all just one day the switch is going to flip and it's all good, right? Just less intense, less often, less long. Yeah.
Yeah.
That journey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
I appreciate that.
mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was great. Yeah.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Yeah.
And really,
Agreed.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I would love to continue these conversations.
Yeah. Well, we will do it again for sure.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for coming and spending a little bit of your day with us.
Absolutely. You are welcome. This was fun.
Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.